welcome to everybody who's here. We're obviously Brock and Fredette Eide from Dyslexic Advantage, and it's really our privilege to help host this session along with contributions from the National Geographic Society and the Ocean Exploration Trust. And we give them our thanks for helping to sponsor this. And our biggest thanks to Bob Ballard, who's our honored guest today. Bob is joining us on the occasion of the publication of his new book, Into the Deep, which is an absolutely remarkable book that's available not only in print, but in digital version, so it can be listened to for folks that like to use text-to-speech version. Absolutely amazing story. We're going to hear Bob talk a little bit about the book, a little bit about his work and about his life. Most people probably who've heard of Bob, which is most people now, have heard of him as probably in the context of the discovery of the Titanic. But as someone with a background in biology, Bob's work in that field to me is just absolutely epic making. He is the kind of person who's, if you read general textbooks in different subjects in the science, you'll come across work that he's influenced and been a part of in the first chapters of most of those books, where they talk about the things that really set the stage for things. So discovery really of a new whole kingdom of animals and new type of biochemical reaction that contributes to the development of early life, and earth really field shaping discoveries in geology, and amazing work as an explorer. He's played a key role in national defense and in other areas. It's hard to take the measure of a person like Bob, because you would have to be as well-rounded as he is to understand the breadth and depth of his contributions.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, and I want to thank you for your great work. Reading the Dyslexic Advantage very late in life, when I discovered I was dyslexic, was really so helpful and really changed my attitude, as it has so many other people, to view it as quite a special gift. Now, I think what I'm going to do, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with about 20 minutes where I'd like to walk you through what I've been up to and where we're going, and weave into that how being dyslexic has really led to my success in so many things I've tried to do. And then I'll go to the most favorite part, and that's where we can just sit around the fire and chat and talk about anything you want to talk about. So my daughter, who's Emily Rose, who's also dyslexic, and it was through her that I discovered my dyslexia, is running the show here. So Emily, can you give me that first? You know, I think the most important image to ever come out of the space program was when the astronauts on their way to the moon looked back over their shoulder and saw this little blue marble in a vast velvet void of nothingness. That I realized, and I think we all realized, what a tiny little speck of life we are in a vast solar system. I was born in Wichita, Kansas, and I like to joke where all oceanographers come from. But it was really the shaping moment for me was when I was 12 years old and I went to the movies. I didn't read the book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. If I did, I would have discovered that Nemo was actually from India and had a turban. But I was introduced to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by the Walt Disney movie that you see here. I was 12 years old, and I remember coming out of that theater and going home, and a while later, my parents asked me what I wanted to do when I grow up, and I said I wanted to be Captain Nemo. And fortunately, they didn't laugh at my dream. No one should ever laugh at a child's dream, no matter how silly it was. So they worked on it. They said, tell me more about the Nautilus. I said, well, it's a submarine. And I was living in San Diego at the time. And so my parents took me down to the submarine base in Ballard, down at Point Loma. And I went aboard a diesel submarine. Like I say, I'm 79. I was born 6 months after World War II. So the first submarine I went on was one that was open to the public, and there was a diesel submarine. But then they said, well, the Nautilus was more than a submarine. I said, yeah, it had a window and you could look out, it opened like the iris of a lens and you could see the ocean floor. And they said, well, that sounds like an oceanographer. And so, sure enough, not far from my home was the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, where they took me. And in fact, when I was 17 years old, I wrote a letter. Fortunately, my parents made sure all my spelling was right, to Scripps, saying I would love to be an oceanographer. And I got a scholarship as a child. And that changed my life when I went to sea on my first expedition in 1954. Now, when I was going to high school and then into college at the University of California, Santa Barbara, military service was mandatory to all freshmen and sophomore at land-grant universities. And I actually began at UC Santa Barbara in the Army. The university only offered Army ROTC, and I went and volunteered to be a combat infantry officer during Vietnam. So I was trained as an Army infantry officer. But then I went off to graduate school before going on active duty to USC, where I was growing up in Southern California. And at that time, I went down to the submarine, to the Naval Recruiting Office, and I said, I'm getting a PhD in oceanography, and it seems a little crazy to spend my life in the Army. So I got a form, an inter-service transfer, filled it out, and then went back to graduate school. And then one night in Long Beach, there was a knock on a door. I opened the door, and there was a naval officer standing there with a slip of paper that said, "Congratulations, you are no longer in the U.S. Army. You're now a naval officer, an Ensign Ballard. You have 6 days to report to active duty on the East Coast of the United States." And I had never been east of the Mississippi, but jumped in my little VW, and I went out, and that's where I fell in love with the deep diving world. And for the next 30 years, I went into all of these different deep diving vehicles. One of my favorites, naturally, was the one that you see on the left, where there's a bunch of naval personnel standing on a miniature submarine. It's called the NR-1. It's one of only submarine that can go 3,000 feet beneath the sea. It's a nuclear submarine, but it's tiny, carries 11 people, and it can stay underwater for a month at a time. And yes, it has windows, and it can literally roll along the bottom. So can you imagine a kid that wanted to be Captain Nemo spending 20 odd years off and on going inside the NR-1? But as I said, I also dove in a lot of other deep diving vehicles, but my favorite one was where I was assigned at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And this is a picture I took during my early dives. Now that picture on the right is a shot with a wide angle lens, which makes it look like it's very roomy. It's not. I'm 6'2", and the submarine is 6 feet in diameter. So every time I stood up, I knocked my head on the hatch. But for 20 years, I used this deep diving submarine to explore the ocean floor. When I was going after active duty, I went to graduate school, and that's when we were told about a whole new theory about our planet called plate tectonics. And here you see an image when I was in college where they drained the ocean to show the floor of the ocean. And it's crazy to call it a floor because it has the largest mountain ranges on Earth. Running around the ocean like the seam on a baseball is a giant undersea mountain range called the Mid-Ocean Ridge. And it's along the axis of this mountain range. There it is up in the upper left-hand corner. It literally cleaves the mountain range apart as the plates separate. And out of that tearing apart, the Earth bleeds its molten blood. And that blood flows up from deep inside the Earth, hardens and forms new tissue. And I was lucky to be in the first team of explorers to look at what we call the boundary of creation and to confirm the theory of plate tectonics. But that was then followed by another series of expeditions where I was driving along the axis of this boundary of creation, where there are literally tens of thousands of active volcanoes, and I came across these tall chimneys. We call them black smokers, which was not accurate at all. They're not smoke at all. In fact, when we saw them, you see that cartoon with Alvin, I asked the pilot to go up and get close, which he was not excited about. But we went up to it, and as I peered at the very entrance of the where it was coming out, it was clear fluid. It was a clear fluid. But then when that hot fluid, called hydrothermal fluid, hit cold seawater, it quenched, and it precipitated out these black microcrystals of pyrite, chalcopyrite, and hydrite and sphalerite, which contain commercial concentrations of copper, lead, silver, zinc, and gold. And what we discovered was that the entire volume of the world's oceans was going inside this mountain range and out every 6 to 8 million years. So in the early expeditions, we threw away our geology book. Now we were throwing away our chemistry book as we began to explain why the ocean had its unique chemistry. But that was dwarfed by what we discovered living around these hydrothermal vents, oases of life in a world of darkness where photosynthesis is impossible. We found dense concentrations of creatures characterized by my favorite with these giant worms, tube worms that are up to 13 feet tall, that are sticking out their lung. That red feathery looking head is the lung of the tube worm, and it's literally ingesting from the hydrothermal fluids dissolved hydrogen sulfide gas that would kill anything that comes in contact with it. Yet these giant worms, as well as giant clams a foot across that had human-like blood, and these are the first ones we ever picked up, and I dissected it, and it had no internal organs. It didn't have any mouth, gut, or digestive system. In fact, inside its body was another creature, what we call an extremophile, that had figured out over eons of time how to duplicate photosynthesis in the dark. This was really, we knew life had begun in our oceans, but we didn't know where. Now we knew where. So we threw out our biology book because we found a ecosystem that was living independent of the sun. And we'd been taught that all life was dependent upon photosynthesis, energy from the sun. This system was living literally off the energy of Earth, which now tells us we're not alone in the universe. There's life pervasive throughout the universe. In fact, this discovery is guiding NASA to explore the moons of Jupiter, in particular Enceladus and Europa, that have far larger oceans, that have active volcanoes. And we believe within the next 10 years, we will find life on these moons of Saturn and Jupiter. So it's quite amazing discovery. But the way I look at it is I view the Earth as a living creature. It's a concept of Gaia by Dr. Lovelock, who, by the way, was dyslexic or is dyslexic. By the way, so was Walt Disney. Walt Disney was dyslexic, but he came up with the theory of Gaia that the Earth is actually a living creature, living in symbiotic relationship with all life on our planet. And that system has been going along since the origin of Earth 4.8 billion years ago. But now that symbiotic relationship is being disrupted by one species of creature on our planet, and it's us. The Earth is now deeply concerned about this one creature, as is all other life. And I think we need to cut a new deal with Gaia, because it will win. Unless the human race changes its ways, we will be eliminated. Whether it's through another pandemic or a pandemic after that, we need to come in harmony with our planet. And that's a real crusade I'm on right now, of trying to make sure that we survive. I'm not worried that Earth's going to survive. It'll be around for billions of years. It's just a teenager in the solar system. I'm not worried about life surviving. I'm worried about the human race surviving. But what I was doing was developing new technology to explore. And the first application of what we call telepresence, the use of robotic systems, was the expedition to find the Titanic. One of the reasons for writing the book was I was a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, Explorer Scout, Army officer, naval officer, always told to tell the truth. And I was not allowed to tell the truth behind my discovery of the Titanic at the time because it was classified top secret, because it was really a cover to explore two nuclear submarines we lost during the Cold War, which you'll read all about in the book. So like I say, one of the reasons for writing the book was so I could clear my conscience and tell the truth. But the Titanic was really amazing because it showed me that the deep sea is the largest museum on Earth. There's more history in the deep sea than all of the museums of the world combined. In fact, the United Nations estimates there are 3 million shipwrecks beneath the sea, and we've only found a few thousand at best. So the next generation will discover amazing chapters of lost human history. I went on after finding the Titanic to find the Bismarck. But really what I want to do is tell you about what I'm doing now. As we know, when Napoleon came to President Jefferson in the 1800s, he had lost a war with England and had to pay a war debt, and he needed some fast money. And he asked President Jefferson if he would purchase the Louisiana Purchase for $21 million. That was a lot of money back then, $21 million. Now, Congress was naturally opposed to it, didn't see why we would want to buy the Louisiana Purchase, but Jefferson, being the great leader that he was, went ahead with it, and he doubled the size of the United States. And then he had Lewis and Clark go out and explore this new discovery. And as we all know, that dramatically changed the economic engine of our nation. Well, when President Reagan was president, he picked up a pen. And for the price of a pen, he declared the new America. He declared that America owned all land 200 miles from its shores. And here you can see it on this illustration I did in National Geographic. We own more land beneath the sea than any other nation on our planet, yet we have better maps of Mars than half the United States of America. So my mission is to go and mount the second Lewis and Clark expedition, and naturally, I call my ship the EV Nautilus. But it's really not the second Lewis and Clark expedition, because my corps of exploration, unlike Lewis and Clark, which only had one woman, Sacagawea, 55% of my corps, as you will see, are women in positions of leadership and authority. Still leaves 45% for us. It's basically the population of our universities. And our mission is to boldly go where no one has gone before on planet Earth using the most advanced telepresent technology. Since we're going where we've never been, we have no idea what we're going to encounter. So what happens when we make a discovery? Well, we're able to beam that back to the beach. Here we are in our command center. We can beam it back to the beach, and then we can transmit it out through our Inner Space Center on Internet 2 Level 3. And we can also showcase the young men and women that make up our corps. So we're about to embark upon that expedition July 3rd. It'll go on for 10 years, and you can tune into it. Here's our team. As you can see, we want every face of our country on our team. By the way, that young lady in the middle is my daughter, Emily, who's running the production center off camera right now. She, like her mother, is into television production. She prefers to be behind the camera, although she does know how to smile when she sees a camera. And so this is our Nautilus website. So this is where you want to go, starting July 3rd, when I take my team on its expedition that will run all the way up to just before Christmas. So now let's go back, and let's go back to me, Emily. and I'm ready to take questions.
Okay, number one is Sophia from California. I'm a 16-year-old dyslexic student who loves the ocean and wants to study marine science, especially the unknown deep. How did you enter the field after college, and what was the coolest thing you've ever found in the ocean? And what advice would you have for someone like me?
Well, to begin with, we are visual learners. If you're dyslexic, you're a visual learner. And so I went into geology, into field geology, because I'm not only dyslexic, I'm ADHD, I have a bundle of energy. And I found I picked a profession that required me, it was a contact sport, so to speak. I also played college athletics and ways of getting out my energy. I like to have that balance between physical and mental to give my brain a chance to calm down. So I did a lot of walking about as a child. And that back in the old days, our parents would say, just be home before it's dark. A little different dialogue nowadays, but that's what they used to say. And I would just take off. And so being a field geologist, I began to learn that if I stared at something long enough, I could figure it out. Everything is determinate. You just got to decode it and figure it out. And my kids, Emily and Ben, would constantly say, stop eyeballing me. And I say, I'm just trying to figure you out. But I found that if I stared at things long enough, I could figure things out, because I also studied physics. I studied the laws of physics. And it's so cool because we all dream. Like I say, Disney was a dyslexic and a great dreamer. Right on my desk at home, it says, if you can dream it, you can do it. But I wanted to make sure the kinds of dreams I had were possible. And so I'm sort of, by taking physics and learning the laws of physics, the rules that we play by in the universe. What an amazing set of rules. If you learn those sets of rules in school, you can then dream things that are possible. So everything I used to come up with a crazy idea, maybe crazy, but it was possible. So I would say a field geologist is a great way to go, because most of the planet's beneath the sea, 72% of it. But we look at the whole system. Yes, I go underwater a lot, 72% of the time, but 28% of the time I climb volcanoes. So I really love the physical labor of a field geologist, and it just played so well into my being dyslexic. Now, what was other parts of her question?
What was the coolest thing you've ever found in the ocean? So of all your discoveries, what's your favorite?
Well, everyone wants me to say Titanic, but it was, I had pictures of it. It was a 13-foot tube worm sticking out its lung, spewing poisonous gas. I went, you gotta be kidding. I mean, that was about as cool as you can get. Still scratching my head on the conversation that worm must have had with that bacterium. I'm sure it took a while to convince him to do that. What's the next one?
And the last was, what advice would you have for someone like me? So someone who's interested in pursuing ocean science, marine science.
The key is follow your passion. Don't let anyone talk you out of what you really, really want to do. I mean, don't become this for your mother or that for your dad or that for a boyfriend. No, it's your passion. Certainly, I had a different road to travel down. Being dyslexic, you know what I'm talking about. It's a road less traveled. And so I encountered lots of obstacles. And I studied existentialism and Dostoevsky and Sartre. I believe that you just go, you figure out a way around it or over it or under it or whatever. Don't let the wall stop you. But I also learned that I'm going to get knocked down. And you get knocked down and you lay there, and sort of like a prize fighter. I always thought it was crazy. A prize fighter would get knocked down, and why would they want to get up? The referee just counts 10 and it's all over with. Something causes them to get up. Something causes all of us to get up, and it's our passion. It's our driving engine in life is our passion. If you don't love what you're doing, go do something else. Follow your passion, follow your dream, and you will find that energy that gets you through failure, because failure is the greatest teacher you'll ever meet. And I always pick difficult things to do because it's challenging, and I fail. I didn't find the Titanic the first time. I didn't find the Bismarck. I went after Amelia Earhart. I haven't got my round two yet on that one, but I got it coming. And I remember looking in the camera when I was coming home from the Bismarck, and I hadn't found it, and they'd spent a lot of memberships of that magazine on me. And the producer says, "So Bob, how do you feel?" And I looked in the lens and I said, "Round one to the Bismarck, I know where it isn't. I'll get it next time." And I got it next time. So remember, you define, like if you were playing, I'm a Red Sox guy. And I was brought up as a LA Dodger guy, but then I came out to New England and they took me in a room and converted me to and my daughter's a Yankee fan, so we have this Yankee thing and Dodger thing going on in our family. And I said, well, anyone can bet on the Yankees because they always win, but it's the Red Sox. What I'm saying is that imagine if you could control how many innings there were to a baseball game. And the Yankees came up to plate and the first 9 balls went out over the green monster and 9-0. And you just finally wait until their arms fall off from hitting home runs, and then you beat them. So the key is, if you don't give up, you can't lose. It may take longer, but if you don't quit, you can't lose. You will win. And then you stop the game. We're ahead. Stop. We won. No, you control your destiny. And so you define when you quit and when you don't quit. But I know if you want to succeed, you will.
Yeah. And
it just got to be stubborn. And who wants to climb a mountain? See, I set goals. And my son Ben loves to sail. And I never was a sailor. I didn't do this. I set the gyro and went that way. But he grew up sailing as his mother did and their family. And I asked my son, how often is the bow of the ship pointed at the finish line? He says, almost never. And I said, well, why? Well, he says, the winds are never right. You never get a following sea straight to the goal. You have other winds blowing. I said, what do? You tack. And I said, what's a tack? I know you put that in no, it's not a nail. It's a maneuver. I said, well, tell me what a tack is. Well, the winds, you look for the best reach, they call it. It's never at where you want to go, but it's the best reach you can get. And you sail on that reach until you start to move away. And then you tack and you tack and you tack. And you finally cross over the finish line sideways. You'll always cross over the finish line sideways. That's life. A series of strategic tacking maneuvers. But first you have to have an end goal. And I found that if I picked a goal that took a day, I had to pick another one the next day. I said, oh, another goal. No, let's pick I always picked 15-year goals because I knew it was going to take 15 years. So I knew my goal. And then I could tack along in interesting side trips along the way. But I always knew where I was headed. And I would always get up in the morning and I would say, what are my options today? A, B, C, or D. What's the best tack? I'm going to do that. So the goal, it doesn't matter what you pick because life is the act of becoming. That's my guru, Joseph Campbell. Life is the act of becoming. You never arrive. You just keep becoming. And that's a series of constant tacking maneuvers. It's also another analogy is the epic journey. The epic journey begins with a vision, a dream to be something. For me, Captain Nemo. You then take that dream and say, well, what do I have to do it? Well, I got to take science and I go to do math. I didn't necessarily love it. I knew I needed it to fulfill my dream. So you prepare yourself in life to live your dream. And then finally, you set forth on your journey and you're going to be tested. And you're going to go through 2 tests. The first one is, did you prepare yourself mentally? Did you study? Did you get ready for it? And that's actually the easy one. The second one is, how strong is your heart? How strong is your passion? And then if you hang in there, Storms are always at sea, but the seas always calm down and the sun always comes out. There are storms in life, but they always end and the sun comes out. You just need to row through it and survive it. And then I say the most important thing you need to learn in school is to survive a bad teacher. That's your challenge, is to survive a bad teacher who's going to snuff out your passion. Don't let that happen. So then the sun comes out. Neptune pulls back the veil of secrecy, and there's the discovery. You attain your goal, but the journey is never over till you return to society and share the truth. Share what you learned, and that frees you to go on your next journey. So it's a wonderful rhythm that you develop in life, but it's driven by having goals. First little ones, and then wow, that was easy. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Because if you fall off a mountain that's 1,000 feet tall, you're dead. So climb one 35,000 feet, you're gonna be dead as well. So pick something. And I found out that the bigger the goal, the less people on the mountain. It's easier to climb, actually. Go down a path less traveled. We're on it, you guys. We're on that path, and it's actually easier than the other path.
Fantastic. Yeah. I would like to add again that Into the Deep. So Bob's autobiography that's just come out.
I got it right there, just in case you missed it.
And it's coming out. What you said, that there's also a special coming out that's kind of paired with
it, right? Television special that's a companion to Into the Deep, National Geographic, on June 14th on National Geographic Channel, awesome. 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific, and then whatever's in between. And also it'll go on to Disney Plus. And so, yeah, watch it, because they did a wonderful job of weaving it. And like I say, I looked at the movies more than I read the books. But the good news about Into the Deep, you can get it in audio, and Disney's going to release it, because Disney was dyslexic. They're going to release it in dyslexic font as an ebook. So they're coming at you every way in the world to get the message. And it's getting good reviews. I hope you like it.
It just came out last week. Fantastic. And I would say that all these lessons that Bob is sharing now are reinforced both kind of explicitly and also by example in the book. And I thought for me that was one of the most fantastic things that the book showed, was just how to deal with adversity, how to respond to challenges, how to persist in the face of challenges that look like at first they might.
Well, I love what you guys said on the blurb, along with Ken Burns and Jim Cameron and Henry, and some nice comments. Nice. Oh, I got it right back there. How we doing?
Lovely.
So another question. Come on.
Yes. So this is from Tom in Washington, who we know is Tom West, who's a board member for Dyslexic Advantage, but also one of the most important authors in the field of dyslexia, who wrote the classic In the Mind's Eye, that was one of our great inspirations, and also some other great books in the field. His question to you is, what were you able to see that others could not see? Something that they did not look for, but was obvious once you brought it to their attention.
Well, it's a combination of being dyslexic and being common sense from Kansas. I think we sometimes overthink these things. And I can remember, I wander, as you know. I wander around in different worlds, sort of upsets. What are you doing here? I just came walking around. Well, you're not supposed to be here. Well, I'm going to wander anyway. And I can remember when I wandered into the field of marine archaeology, which was, I'm a geologist. It wasn't necessarily a friendly encounter. I became friendly with some of them. And they were saying that the ancient mariner hugged the coastline. And I went, oh, really? Why would he want to do that? Well, because he didn't want to go out and get lost. I said, if he'd done it about 100 times, I think he probably knows where he's going. No, he didn't. I said, well, I'll bet that they knew where they were going and they took the straight line. So I did this really complicated calculation. I took a map of the Mediterranean and I looked at Carthage. There it is. And I looked at Rome and I went, I'll bet you they went this way and not this way. And so I took a ruler. This was really complicated technology. And I drew a straight line between Carthage and Rome. I said, they went down that highway. And then I said, what was traveling down that highway? A ship full of booze. Oh, really? Yeah, a ship from Carthage bringing hundreds of bottles, or what they call amphoras, big clay jars, full of wine. Well, what do you think the sailors did? Well, let's have a little wine. What did they do with the evidence? Threw it overboard. So I said, let me see if I got this right. You got a bunch of sailors on a ship with 500 bottles of wine for 4 days. They're gonna, this is just real science, isn't real complicated here. And they're going to mark the highway with Roman empties. And I knew that the sedimentation rate between Carthage and Rome out in the deeper part of what's called Skirky Bank and the Tyrrhenian Sea is a centimeter per millennium. That's it, folks. And they drop a jar that's this wide, lands on the bottom, and it's going to be there. It's like a freeway without an adopt a highway program for 2 millenniums. Can you imagine what our freeways would look like? This is common sense. So I said, I'm going to go out and look for empties. Guess what? So I went out there and I said, well, this is Carthage, this is Rome. I'm going to go from land in Sicily to land in Sardinia, and I'm going to look for Roman empties. So I dropped the camera down. I drove along. Now, for the first 100 miles, I didn't see any empties. And I said, well, we're not there yet. Of course, you don't find the empties in the middle of the forest. You got to get to the road. Sure enough, right on that line, empties. 4 kilometers wide of empties. So they sort of a little lost in the navigation, wasn't GPS, but 4 kilometers. And then I turned and went down that highway, nothing but empties. And then the 16 wheelers that were broken down along the side of the road with the Roman, there they were. Boom, done. Next. That's just, I've always found that I've always told some of my colleagues, which they don't like hearing this, if you can't explain to a middle school kid what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. When you get gobbledygook, they don't know what they're doing. Don't listen to gobbledygook. It finally comes down to it. Plate tectonics. You should have seen the theory that preceded plate tectonics. It was called Marshall Kay's geosynclinal cycle. To get an A on my exam in college, I had to repeat Marshall Kay's geosynclinal cycle on how you make a mountain range. And here's how it went. We got a mountain, got it. There rain falls on it, got it. The rain goes down the slope of the mountain, got it. It erodes and weathers it, got it. Turns the water brown, got it. Goes out into the ocean, got it. Drops the sediments, got it. And a mountain comes up. Did not get that final step. I got everything else leading up to the mountain suddenly comes out of the ocean. Yeah, that's how it gets so low. And I went, no. Well, it was wrong. And then they come up with plate tectonics. The Earth's a bunch of pieces, about 30, a bunch of them, big ones and little ones, about 30 big ones. And they do one of 3 things. They do this, that's the mid-ocean ridge, and it bleeds. They do this, make mountain range, and they do this, San Andreas Fault. This, or this. Done. That's it, kids. And you can now decipher the entire behavior of the planet based upon this, or that. Yeah, pretty straightforward when you figure it out. I have a chapter in there, and that was making sure that I had other authors help me. I said, no, I'll write the part on plate tectonics because you make it too complicated. It's not. So anyway, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy because all kids are born scientists. They have that little flame of curiosity, and you've got to make sure that someone doesn't blow out the pilot light.
Yeah, well, that kind of feeds right into this next question, which is from Danielle in Pennsylvania. And she's asking about best practices for encouraging dyslexic kids to find their strengths and build their strengths. And you can address this both as a dyslexic person and as a parent of a talented dyslexic child. So what?
I understand that we don't encode and decode as fast as others. Why are you asking us to do something that we have difficulty doing? Oral exams, bam, nail them. Okay, there's so many other ways. Emily had teachers that said, Emily's not, having a little troubles in learning things, but when we ask her, she knows the answer. How does that? I said, duh. I mean, you're not giving her enough time because her mind is slow at encoding and decoding. People say if you threw a frog off the Empire State Building and said fly, it would not be a very good encounter. So don't ask us to do what we're not good at. But if I wrote the rules, you'd flunk my exams, because I would write an exam built around our strengths. Here's how I did it. First place, I knew I had to take a little longer, so I had to do real good time management. So I didn't waste time, because every morsel of time is a gem, and I didn't want to waste it. So I was always planning almost everything I do, almost to a point that I had to unplan. It was getting a little too much of that. But what I discovered was that I would come back from school right out of a lecture, so it's still fresh in my mind, and I'd sit at a typewriter back then, folks, and I would type up my notes. I would read my handwriting and go, wow, fortunately I can still make it out. But if I waited another 2 hours, I couldn't read my own handwriting. So I needed to get it where I could read it. And then as I was typing, I would remember other things that were said that I hadn't got on my notes, and I'd add that in. So then I now had it in print form. And I discovered that I have two minds, my conscious and my subconscious, and that my conscience goes to bed, but my subconscious doesn't. And my subconscious is smarter than my conscious. So here's what I would do. I would take my notes and I would literally photograph them. Click. And I would photograph them as I went to sleep. So the last thing my conscience was doing was looking at my notes. There wasn't any, I would force out any crazy other thing. And I would literally wake up in the morning and I had complete memory of my notes. I actually felt a little bad when I took an exam, because I closed my eyes and read my notes. And I thought, is that cheating? I don't think so. But I had a built-in ability to photograph my notes, and I would literally close my eyes and read them. Oh, there's the answer. Isn't that wild? And that's the gift we have, of the visual gift. I work in the total darkness. This is my, by the way, this is my, when we're at sea, zoom out, could you, Emily? This is the coolest thing. This is the looking glass when I'm not at sea on the Nautilus, and the sea, it's not at sea right now, July 3rd, this is live. And you see this control right here. It's easy to throw images around, but this is actually a switching panel. And by the way I hit the switches, I create conversations. So let's say I want to be tactical. I want to talk to the pilot, co-pilot, navigator ship. So I can just hit 4 switches, put on my headset, and I'm listening in on the go left, go right, tactical maneuvers. Or I can switch them off and switch on 100 scientists that are at places like this having a conversation, or talk to a teacher like we're doing now. Do that all simultaneously, because this technology is so powerful. And now with these new vehicles we're adding, zoom in on that, Emily. This is what we're doing in September. You want to watch. We're putting in all these autonomous vehicles. These are all zoom. Can you zoom in even more, you Mac? There we go. So I have Hercules, but then I have all these other little autonomous robots that are going in the water that are like a pack of dogs. And so I get on a trade route, for example, and I'm finding them, and I send the dogs out, and they go over and they come back and say, stop what you're doing. We found something more powerful. This technology is going to revolutionize not only our exploration, but how we travel. We'll be running robots from Hertz and the Serengeti. It's all about moving your spirit, moving out of your body and having an out-of-body experience, just like in the movie Avatar, when Jake went in the Na'vi and became a Na'vi. That's where we're going, folks. I'm already there. Cool. So yeah, it's amazing where we're headed technologically, and it's very green because spirits don't leave a carbon footprint, and they move at the speed of light.
Should I read this one?
Go ahead.
Martin has a question. There's a longer intro, but it says, have you ever thought of taking other career paths at any point in your life? And in your mind, is it ever too late to start something new?
I think if you read my book, you'll see I'm living how many, when you read the book, how many career paths I'm on? 5 or 6?
Switch.
At least, you know, those
Yeah.
are the declassified ones. And
If I told you that, I got to kill you. But I'm living simultaneous lives. I feel like, what was that movie, The Three Faces of Eve or whatever?
Yeah.
There was lots of different shows where people were living multiple lives.
Sybil or something.
Yeah, all of them. I'm living all these lives simultaneously. And it's like I'm living 500 years, because I'm going to try to live 100 years at least once, but do it 5 times at the same time. And it's so enriching because I wander amongst all these worlds, because I have a fundamental respect for the institutions of society, whether it's the church, whether it's science, whether it's the military, whether it's academia, whether it's the private sector. There's good people in all of those. I don't demonize anything. There are what I call the guardians of the difference, the people that grow tall by cutting the legs off of other people. I don't do that. I try to get people to get taller, not shorter. So it's about having a fundamental respect for, I can put on a uniform and be about as military as you can imagine. I can put on my academic gown and be as academic as you want. I can be what I'm doing now, an educator. I live all these different lives, and I'm a Swiss Army knife. I love my ability to carry on a conversation with lots of people in different ways and have something intelligent to say. So I think you just try to live that multiplicity of lives, but the way you do it is get a good solid base to build upon. And that's the advice I got, as you'll read in the book. I took a quadruple major. I didn't get the dean's list. I got some D's. You know, I majored in, imagine this, I majored in chemistry and geology, minored in physics and mathematics, played college basketball, was junior class president, ROTC, in a fraternity. I didn't miss anything. And at times I overextended myself and I paid for it. As you'll read in the book, I didn't get to the graduate school I wanted to get into because I really spread myself thin, but late in life, they offered me a tenured position. Down. So no, yeah, go for it, you know, and just know that it's okay to be dyslexic. In fact, I live in a world of total darkness, and I have to close my eyes and navigate in a world of total darkness, and I have no trouble whatsoever. It just comes naturally. It just comes naturally to me. And I'm surprised that others can't do it, but then I've discovered, well, they're not dyslexic. They can't, but we can. So go down the road less traveled.
Another good question here from Magenta in Korea. She said, as you become more aware of your own mind strengths, do you find it becoming more natural and easier to recognize someone else's dyslexia through their strengths as well?
Absolutely.
You actually shared a great story with us about this.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a story where we went after Amelia Earhart, and last time I was at sea, and haven't been since in August of 2019. We were out looking for Amelia Earhart, and we were going to practice beforehand with a lot of the new toys I talked about off of American Samoa. So it wasn't the A team. because I knew the A-team were resting for this hard mission. So I went with a lot of students, young people, college kids, undergraduates, and we're sitting in the command center, which is not terribly, can you, well, in the book, there you can see the command center. It's like this, but it's really Star Trek-y. And we're sitting in there and we're getting ready to go to sea to practice. This young lady, an undergraduate, was sitting next to me. She was going to be standing the video watch. And a young man over here that was standing the navigator watch. I had never met them before. They were young and they were coming out for a couple of weeks as a part of our intern program. And this young lady said, "Why am I so comfortable in this room?" I said, I don't know why. She said, "There's something about the way this room is set up that makes me so comfortable." And then I had to ask, "Are you dyslexic?" And she said, "Yes." Well, guess what? A dyslexic designed this room. And then the navigator spoke up, "And so am I." And it's because I built it as a massive imaging library. I have 40, when you see what my big command center looks like, it's like going into a store that's selling nothing but 1,000 TV sets and computers. It's nothing but visual information. And my mind just, I stand in the middle of the room when I'm in my zone. And Emily has seen her dad at home and, yells at me and tells me all, but she knows that when I'm out there, she doesn't yell at me. I'm in my zone. And my team hadn't seen me a lot in my zone because I'm now mentoring, I'm stepping back. But Amelia, I'm leading the doggone thing. And I'm standing in the middle of the room and I just absorb it and form a three-dimensional space, like it's an amazingly complicated video game. I don't know how, maybe I should ask you, how do dyslexics do with video games? But this is a giant video game and it just clicks. And I am so comfortable doing that.
Yeah, it's just, it's interesting too, just how opposite that kind of environment is from the sort of single channel format that we use in so much of education.
Yeah, what I discovered when we did the Jason project, this is when I came back from the Titanic and 16,000 letters from kids saying, "I want to do what you do." And I was doing telepresence, where I was going to so I said, I dreamed up the Jason project. You can look it up. And we built command centers. This was 1989. And we had pretty much like this with big screens. This is 1989. I set up, as you remember, when the book I talked about this crazy project I did. And they would bring in school kids and fill auditorium, pre-internet, no internet. We're doing it by satellites. And kids would come in there. These are middle school kids, so the energy level is beyond all compare. And the room would go silent and stay silent for an hour. And the teachers came up and said, "What are you doing to our kids?" And I go, "Well, what am I doing?" They're not silent when I'm teaching. Why are they silent? And these are kids from other schools, whole dynamics of rivalries of this school and that, silence. And I said, "Well, why don't you tell me?" And they said, we'll watch it. We did 90 some broadcasts and they were bringing kids in. And they came back and they said, I watched their eyes. And I said, we know we learn, we retain so much of what we read. We retain so much of what we hear, but we retain vast amounts of what we do and hands-on. But they said, they're not moving their hands, they're moving their eyes. And what you've done is you've presented them with a choice of things to look at, and they don't know which one to look at. So they're constantly checking it out, but they're all supporting one another.
Yeah.
And so it's eyes on. They're not looking out the window at someone walking by. They're not being distracted by a student next to them. They're being given a decision. And they said, we just watched their eyes, and their eyes were constantly moving, and their retention just went through the roof. And that's an an eye equivalent of hands-on learning. So the more visual stimulations, as long as they're related to one another, which all my monitors are related, they then do that. And I think that's why dyslexics are really good at that. So the more visual stimulation in a learning experience you can give a child with dyslexia, their retention is going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's played that game, but I did a paper on it with a Judy Basler at let's see, where was Lehigh University? They had a school of education, and they analyzed this phenomena that I was creating through visual stimulation to teaching. It's cool. Maybe you could do some homework on that.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
do.
right. Well, just the letting kids also see that science, what science looks like when it's taking place. I think there's such a misapprehension, especially for kids who find it easy to get into the textbooks, that science is all about learning facts that somebody else has discovered and put in books.
And the
Yeah.
worst role model's a nerd. You know, I'm not really big on nerds. I mean, it's okay. I mean, that's all right. But this is a sport. I mean, this is anything but for us ADHDs. The last thing is telling us to sit still, for gosh sake. So how do you channel that energy? I was talking to you about how I do puzzles because I get spun up. Particularly I get up in the morning, I don't want to see anybody because I'm so full of things when I wake up. It's like I just charged my batteries in my mind all night, and I wake up and I run to my office, which is not far away, and it pours. And I don't want to disrupt that pouring out. I got up at 5 this morning because there was something I really wanted to do, and I hammered it. So the idea of pouring it out, but then I get so excited about what I'm thinking, it starts to become counterproductive. So I have a puzzle over in the room. And my wife, it's a big Lazy Susan puzzle. And she rents these puzzles. You only do puzzle once. And she would rent a puzzle that's 1,000-piece puzzle, 1,000-piece. And she covers what it is. So I don't know what it is. I just know it's 1,000 pieces. I pour it out, flip them all over. And I find that I have this rhythm that when I get really excited at my computer doing my thinking, and I then just can't handle it anymore. And I go over to sit down with my puzzle and I start moving some pieces around and I calm down, and I just have to not like the puzzle too much because I got to get back. But I have this about a 30-minute, 10-minute, 30-minute, 10-minute rhythm. I can sustain that indefinitely. Because I'm having so much fun. I just need to control the fun I'm having.
Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
No, that's just fantastic. Well,
Should we do this one last question?
okay,
before we
one
close?
more last question.
Yeah. So Jennifer is saying that her son absolutely loves the Titanic, and he was asking, what is the best thing about finding the Titanic?
That's complicated. First place, people say, what was it like to find it? There was 3 agendas going on. One was that I was on a military top secret mission to explore 2 of our nuclear submarines that we lost during the Cold War with all hands. And in the case of the Scorpion, it had nuclear weapons. And the last thing the Pentagon wanted, I was read the riot act by my commanding officer, Admiral Thunman, when I found the Titanic. He said, "Commander, you were not supposed to find that puppy. You were supposed to just look for it." And I apologized. One of my axioms is never ask permission, just beg forgiveness. And I thought, I'll never do that again, sir. I'm sorry. So they were worried I was going to blow my cover, but the world was so interested in the discovery, they never asked, well, who paid the bill? So the Naval Intelligence paid the bill. So that was, but then there was the moment of discovery. And having played college basketball, you know that, I was a good outside shooter. We didn't get 3 points back then, we got 2. But I was a good outside shooter, and nothing is more thrilling is to make that winning goal at the buzzer. I mean, you can't get better than that, where it buzzes in the air and all net, no rim. And we were getting down to and I only had 12 days. Everyone else had months, and I just had 12 days to do something impossible. And I dreamed up a clever way of finding it that no one else had dreamed up. Again, my dyslexic mind was look for the debris field, don't look for the ship. No one ever thought of that. It's bigger signature. So that's it's much better explained in the book. Okay. So when we found it in the waning moments of the game, it was like that winning shot. And we all just went nuts and jumping up and down and being totally unprofessional, screaming and yelling and acting like kids that just won a basketball game. And then a person in the command center looked up at the clock and says, she sinks in 20 minutes. It was 2 a.m. She sank at 2:20, and we went, oh my, we felt really embarrassed that we were celebrating anything. It was like an emotional wall switch went, and I just went, it hit me, because I was not a Titanic groupie. It was a challenge. It was all these things, but I was not a Titanic. I don't know how many buttons Captain Smith had in his jacket. And I felt embarrassed, and I said, pull the vehicle up to a safe altitude. I got to get some fresh air. 2 a.m. Anyone want to join me? Everyone piled out, and we had a memorial service and said a prayer for those, because we were at the spot where it all played out. You could hear the voices. And we made a promise never to take anything, never to take anything from it. It's a like, you don't go to Gettysburg with a shovel. You don't go to Pearl Harbor and take belt buckles off the Arizona. These are special. There wasn't anything to learn from that belt buckle. There wasn't anything to learn from the Titanic. There was all about hearing it speak. And it spoke. It was powerful, very powerful.
Well, that's we're going to have to end on that note, but there's so much more. There's so much more, and so much more detail that Bob goes into in his book. So again, just get the book, listen to the book.
Get it in audio too.
Yeah.
I like doing both. I'm playing it and reading it at the same time.
The
Yeah, which
immersive
is
reading
great.
approach.
Yeah, adjust the font and everything like that.
And
you
then,
know?
of course, the special coming up June 14th on the National Geographic Channel.
And then
And-
the May issue, the recent issue of National Geographic magazine as well.
Fantastic. And you said for those, because there's a lot more questions we were able to that weren't unanswered. There's a way to interact with you once a
Yeah.
week. Is that right?
If you go to Nautilus Live, we run 24 hours a day. So 24 hours a day. Last expedition we went on, get this, we took and answered 20,000 questions.
Wow.
Because we have a team always up, always answering questions. So nautiluslive.org, and you'll see Ask a Question. Go there now and play with it, because it's got a lot of great stuff from last year and the years before, but then it goes live in July.
Fantastic.
And I'll be on watch. Just ask a question.
Yay. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so
Yeah, thank you so
much.
much,
It's been
Barb.
wonderful. We're also recorded this, and we will upload it to our YouTube channel, Dyslexia.
And a big shout out to Emily Rose.
Thank you, Emily.
Yay,
with a button
Emily.
nose.
You want to come on camera and say hello?
The young lady that taught me that I was
Yay.
dyslexic through her.
Fantastic. All right.